Story 1. The night that changed everything. This is, without a doubt, one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had, and probably the closest I've ever been to real danger, though I didn't realize it at the time. I'm a 19-year-old woman living just outside a mid-sized city in Virginia. Although we're only about 40 minutes away from a decent-sized urban area, my town is still very rural and sparsely populated. At the time, I was attending community college, working toward a nursing degree. Like many young women who hadn't yet found the right guy in their day-to-day lives, I decided to give online dating a try. I wasn't really into the party scene, and none of the guys I already knew were of interest to me, so Tinder seemed like a logical option. At first, things were pretty discouraging. The first month was especially rough. Received nothing but messages from guys looking for one-night stands or asking for things I wouldn't repeat out loud. There were a few who tried to act charming, but it was painfully obvious that their only goal was to get me into bed. The only positive thing that came out of that month was the $50 I made selling feet pics. Judge me if you want, but $50 is $50. At a certain point, I realized I either needed to lower my expectations or find a different way to meet people. I decided to give one of the less sketchy guys a chance. He wasn't exactly impressive, but he seemed decent enough. He had a job, came from a nice family, and had finished college. We met at a coffee shop in town, and surprisingly, we hit it off right away. He was kind, intelligent, and driven, all qualities I found attractive. On top of that, he actually looked better in person than in his profile picture, which was a rare Tinder miracle. After grabbing coffee, we drove around in his car for hours, just talking. But that's when things took a turn. He started talking about conspiracy theories. At first, I thought he was joking, so I playfully called him Alex Jones. Big mistake. He did not appreciate that comment. Things got tense for a moment, but he quickly went back to his ramblings. I'll admit, some of the things he said were kind of interesting, but his conclusions didn't make sense. He'd start with something that seemed reasonable, like government surveillance, but then take a bizarre leap straight into aliens running the world. It was like he skipped from point B to point X with zero explanation. Eventually, we moved on to normal topics, discussing our past relationships and other personal details. Despite his quirks, I felt a connection with him. Maybe he was a little out there, but he wasn't a bad guy, or so I thought. After going on a few more dates, I started asking around about him. I wasn't really into gossip, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to learn a little more about someone I was seeing. Strangely, no one I knew had ever heard of him. Considering he lived in town, I found it odd that he hadn't crossed paths with at least a few people in my social circles. The only ones who had heard of him had some disturbing stories to share. One person told me that he used to rent an apartment above a beauty salon. Apparently, one day, he started stomping around and shouting at the top of his lungs, not out of anger, but like he was trying to convince himself of something. And what was he saying? He was chanting, "Kill them, kill them, kill them." I didn't want to believe it was the same guy. Sure, he was a little eccentric with his conspiracy theories, but he didn't seem dangerous. I convinced myself it was just a rumor. I was so wrong. One Friday night, after finishing my homework, he texted me. He wanted me to come over. Honestly, I wasn't in the mood. I was exhausted and just wanted to relax. I put my phone down and hopped in the shower. When I got out, I had 53 missed calls. Instantly, I panicked. I thought something had happened to my mum or someone in my family, but every single notification was from him. I checked my messages. Over and over, he had sent the same sentence in all caps. "I need your help right now." I hesitated, but decided to call him back. The moment he picked up, I could tell he was in a complete panic. He was breathing heavily, and his voice shook as he told me that someone had broken into his house. At first, I was alarmed, but then something felt off. He said that when he ran to check, the door was wide open, but he couldn't find anyone inside. He was convinced that whoever had broken in was still hiding somewhere, waiting for him to let his guard down. I tried to calm him down. If there was no one there, there was probably no one there, but he wouldn't accept that. Then a thought crossed my mind. Was he even mentally stable? I started doubting whether his door had really been smashed open. Had he imagined it? Had he done it himself? The more I listened to him, the more uneasy I felt. He begged me to come over, but I had no weapon, no way to protect myself. What could I even do? That was it for me. I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media, and hoped I would never hear from him again. I tried to distract myself with a movie and some ice cream. Before I left to get the ice cream, my mum asked me to pick up cigarettes for her. That meant I'd have to drive past his house. I told myself it was fine. He wouldn't even notice me. A few minutes later, I was stuck in traffic near his street. That's when I saw them police cars. Everywhere, my stomach dropped. For a moment, I thought maybe he really had been telling the truth. Maybe someone had actually broken into his house. But then, I overheard a conversation between two officers. He hadn't been attacked. He was the attacker. He had taken his own mother hostage at gunpoint. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I bolted back to my car and drove away as fast as I could. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if I had gone to his house that night. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, and the police managed to get him into custody after a 3-day standoff. He's now serving time in federal prison. It was, without a doubt, the scariest experience of my life. And yet somehow I still have a Tinder profile. Story 2. The girl with the hammer. Being in a toxic relationship can wear down your soul. For 3 years, I gave everything I had to one girl. I was loyal, supportive, and completely committed. And in return, she lied, cheated, and manipulated me. I avoided spending too much time with other women out of respect for her, only to later find out she was doing exactly what I had been trying to prevent. I was furious. I had always prided myself on being a genuinely nice guy, not the kind that expects something in return for kindness, but the kind that simply believes in treating people well. I had been careful, understanding, and patient. And for what? I told myself I needed to move on. No more being the nice guy. I wasn't looking to hurt anyone, but I wanted to boost my confidence, to prove to myself that I could date whoever I wanted. So, I turned to dating apps. My brother, who had never liked my ex, fully encouraged me to get out there and enjoy myself. And, well, I did. That was a mistake. I ended up in one of the biggest dumpster fires of my life. There were moments when I genuinely thought I was in danger, and looking back, I know I was playing with fire. 2 weeks into using dating apps, I was already dating multiple women at once. Within a month, I had 3 women who all believed they were my only girlfriend. One of them was on the same page as me. She just wanted something casual, so she was easy to deal with. Then there was a tall brunette, probably the best of the 3. I still regret meeting her under such stupid circumstances, because she was actually amazing. And then there was Stephanie. Stephanie wasn't a natural blonde. more of a bleached blonde, cowboy boots kind of girl. She had a rough past, full of abuse and terrible relationships. From the very beginning, something about her felt off, and I figured it was only a matter of time before I found out why. Oh, I found out, all right. Stephanie was sharp. She could read my thoughts better than I liked. She asked me twice if I was seeing other women, and both times I lied. I knew if I admitted the truth, she'd leave. And at the time, I wasn't done playing this ridiculous game. Then, one Friday night, things took a turn I never saw coming. I took Stephanie out to a decent steakhouse. Honestly, I wasn't trying to impress high, just wanted a steak. Afterward, we hung out for a bit before I dropped her off. By the time I got home, it was barely 10 p.m., so I figured I had time for round 2 with one of the other women. I texted the second girl, made plans, and headed to her house by midnight. Everything seemed normal until we heard loud banging on the front door. She looked confused. Her parents were out of town, and she wasn't expecting anyone. Stayed in the bedroom while she answered the door. Seconds later, I heard a thud, like someone collapsing. I ran out, turned, saw Stephanie standing there. My heart dropped. The girl I had been with was on the floor, blood running down her face. It looked like she had been punched in the nose. And in Stephanie's hand, a hammer. Tears streamed down her face, but in her eyes, I saw pure rage. I barely managed to mutter, "I'm sorry." Before I could say anything else, she threw the hammer at me. It hit my back hard, leaving a horrible bruise. At that moment, I thought she might have something worse, a knife, maybe even a gun. I had no idea what she was capable of. The girl on the floor was completely unconscious. Stephanie started interrogating me. "How many other women? How long has this been going on? Why wasn't I enough for you?" Everything came back to her not being good enough. In her mind, I had cheated because she had failed me in some way. At that moment, I did something I never thought I'd do. I told her everything. I admitted I had been seeing other women. I admitted that I had been trying to get back at the world for what my ex had done to me. I even told her that if it weren't for my brother encouraging me, I probably wouldn't have gone through with it. Stephanie listened, her breathing shaky. Then she asked me something that shook me to my core. "Do you still love me?" I lied. I told her yes. Not because I didn't, but because I was terrified of what she might do if I said no. I told her I loved her and convinced her to get back into her truck. And when I walked her to the driver's side, I saw something in her vehicle that made my blood run cold. A shotgun, and next to it, a gas canister. My mind raced. What was she planning? Had she intended to do something worse? I didn't want to know. I told her to go home and take some time to cool off. Miraculously, she listened. After she left, I rushed the unconscious girl to the hospital. She had a broken nose, but nothing worse. Thankfully, she didn't even remember what happened. I broke things off with the other 2 women immediately. Stephanie, on the other hand, was going to be harder to get rid of. I deleted all my social media, blocked her number, and cut ties completely. She didn't know where I lived, and all she had was my name and the make of my car. That was weeks ago, and I haven't heard from her since. I still think about what could have happened. About the hammer, the shotgun, the gas canister. I get that heartbreak makes people do crazy things. But what she did that night, that was something else entirely. I only hope she gets help because, God, she needs it. Story 3, the man who kept appearing. When I finally moved out of my parents' house, one of the first things I did was download Tinder. Anyone who's ever tried dating while living at home knows how impossible it is. It doesn't matter how old, mature, or experienced you are in your parents' eyes. You will always be a child. That's why, after my first long-term relationship ended during college, I decided to hold off on dating until I was officially on my own. A little background about me: was 21 at the time, fresh out of college, and working my first real job. I was never a wild, reckless person, but I wanted to be. So, once I had my own space, I decided to experiment a little. At first, this meant hitting up clubs a few nights a week, but that quickly proved useless. Clubs only attracted the worst kinds of guys. That's when I turned to Tinder. At least there, I could screen people before I wasted my time. I remember taking my time, carefully analyzing each profile before swiping left or right. I wasn't overly superficial, but I knew from experience that a guy's appearance and presentation could make a huge difference. A good haircut, decent fashion sense, those could upgrade a guy from a 6 to a 9 overnight. One night, while casually swiping and watching a true crime documentary, my guilty pleasure, I came across a face that felt familiar. It was a guy I had seen before, not in real life, but on Tinder. That shouldn't have been possible. I had swiped left on him before, so why was he popping up again? Curious, I took a closer look. His name was Tyler. He had a long, narrow face, the type of guy who probably spent his weekends at sketchy biker bars. His black hair was long, greasy, and unkempt, and in his profile picture, he wore an expression that could only be described as menacing. This was not someone I was interested in. I swiped left again. At first, I brushed it off as a glitch, but a few days later, I opened Tinder, and there he was again. I hadn't even used the app that much. There were plenty of men in my area, so it wasn't like I had run out of options. And yet, somehow, he kept showing up. I searched online to see if Tinder recycled profiles, but the answers were vague. Some people on Reddit claimed it happened occasionally, but only if you swiped a lot. But I hadn't been on Tinder enough for that, and no other guy's profile repeated, just his. It happened 3 or 4 more times before I got angry. So, I decided to try something. I matched with him just so I could block him. I figured that would finally remove him from my recommendations. Guess again. The very next day, I logged in and there he was. Same picture, same profile. I was officially creeped out. I took a break from Tinder for a while. I told myself it was just a weird coincidence until the next incident happened. One night, I logged into Facebook, which I rarely used, only to find a friend request from him. Same name, same face. At this point, my skin crawled, but I was curious. I had never interacted with him outside of Tinder. How did he find me? Stupidly, I accepted the request just to see what he would do. And, of course, he messaged me immediately. "Hey, I saw you on Tinder." We exchanged less than 5 messages before he asked me where I wanted to meet. For dinner. Then he started threatening me. The things he described weren't just lewd, they were violent. I should have blocked him immediately. But for some reason, I didn't. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the thrill of danger. But for some godforsaken reason, I agreed to meet him. We picked a public location, a strip mall parking lot. I wasn't even sure why I was doing it. I wasn't planning to actually date him, but some weird, reckless part of me wanted to see him. I wanted to know who he was. So, I drove to the parking lot, but parked far away, hidden from view. When I arrived, he was already there. And thank God I saw him before he saw me. because the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew I had made a mistake. He looked worse in person. His hair was even greasier, his posture even sketchier, and his car, it was beat to hell, rusted and filthy, with spray-painted words on the side. And what did it say? Death trap. One glance at him, and one glance at that car, and I knew this was a bad idea. I didn't hesitate. I drove away. I blocked him on Facebook. I deleted my Tinder account. To this day, I don't know what he wanted from me. But whatever it was, I'm grateful I never had to find out. These stories are real. The dangers may be closer than we imagine. If there's one thing we've learned from these accounts, it's that the unexpected can happen at any moment and, more often than not, the scariest threats don't come from the supernatural, but from human beings themselves. Stay alert, trust your instincts, never ignore a warning sign. If you enjoy real and disturbing stories like these, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Got a scary story to share? Drop it in the comments, who knows, it might be featured in the next video. Until next time, and stay safe out there.